So the thinking here was, okay, the world is obsessed with a plus. Suddenly everything's something plus. Nike plus, Dada plus, everything's plus. And we thought, you know what, your Visa, this is the type of thing we designers say. Oh, you can own this. You can own symbols that are universal. Well, you can't. You can if you are Visa. And we said, well, forget about the plus. Let them have the plus. You are the equal sign. And to me, that exemplifies what we look for in a project. That idea of it's very complex until it becomes super easy. When we say embrace complexity, is this idea that, our job is to make things simple, but you need to understand it. You need to know the local knowledge. You need to dig deep into the shapes, the forms, and the content to try and come up with something that suddenly it can be done in any other way.
Good Abend, everybody. I'll make this in English for sure, because our guest is not speaking German. I'd like to welcome everybody for tonight's lecture in Weissraum. I don't know if I need this, but okay, it's better. We're really happy that so many of you came, and I think that speaks for our guest of tonight, who came in from Barcelona today. He is the co-founder and one of 7 partners at Mucho, a design studio founded in 2003 in Barcelona, which today has also offices in 4 other cities all around the world, from Melbourne, Paris, San Francisco, a lot of places. Thank you very much for coming, Pablo Juncadella. I first got in touch with Pablo via another great Spanish designer, Borja Martinez.
Yes.
I pronounced it well.
Very well.
He's from the very wonderful Lo Siento studio, also based in Barcelona. And he was here holding a talk several years ago, and we kept in touch. And he said, I have a very close friend, and one comes to the other. You are friends from childhood on, he told me. And so what a luck that we were holding contact, and you are here tonight. We're really proud, and it's a big pleasure for us. To introduce Pablo very briefly, he graduated at the ENA School of Design and Art in Barcelona. Then he worked at several major design studios, such as Pentagram in London for several years, for instance. He was a creative director of the English newspaper The Observer. And then he decided to found Mucho together with his friend Marc Català in 2003, as I said. The studio is doing a wide variety of projects in very different fields, so from music festivals to technology companies, from universities, museums, to very big clients like Visa or Kodak. I'm sure we will see some of them tonight. Pablo is also a member of the AGI, the Alliance Graphique Internationale, an association which unites the most important graphic designers in the world, and there's an annual meeting somewhere over Europe. I think it was in Torino last year, I heard, very near. Pablo is also teaching, for instance, in the master program of the IDEP, a School of Design, Fashion and Photography in Barcelona, and also at the very well-known University of Elisava for Design and Architecture in Barcelona. So, that's it from my side, more or less. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to all our members and to our supporters, which make this program in Weissraum possible, make this lecture series possible. Thank you very much. I wish us all an inspiring evening, and collect your questions for afterwards. We'll be happy to have a little discussion on the base of what you will show us. So thank you very much, Pablo.
Fantastic, thanks. Thanks everyone for coming. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. I have to confess that I had a little plan of going skiing on the weekend, but that got screwed up by the Off Festival, which is happening that same weekend in Barcelona, so I couldn't make it work out. But it's great to be with you anyhow, and fantastic to get in touch with the community of design in the city of Innsbruck. So we're going to talk about Mucho, the studio. As it was introduced, the company started 21 years ago now. And yeah, I'll start by introducing myself, although the introduction was more than extensive. My name is Pablo Juncadella, so hello to everyone. And my origins, as it was also introduced, I started my professional career between Barcelona and London, started in a small studio in Barcelona and moved to Pentagram when my boss was made partner at Pentagram. And then since stayed in London for about 7 years. The last 3 of them, I was commuting between Barcelona and London. And our first studio was actually, I actually found this picture of a street map in Barcelona. That window used to be the back of my apartment in the old part of town in El Gótico, where Mucho started. It was my partner, Marc Català, which had gone through the same career path than me, that started in a small room in my apartment. We started Mucho. And our first ever clients were a chain of chocolate shops called Chocoa that became a huge hit in the city of Barcelona. It is the thing that everybody would... this is a time where I was commuting back and forth on a plane every week. And I would always see a Chocoa bag going back to London every time. So it became a kind of local thing that everybody would buy. But in parallel, the other client that we had was redesigning our art directing the Observer, the English newspaper, which is actually the oldest newspaper in England, which probably makes it the oldest newspaper in the world. And we were doing, I don't know if you know about the Observer. The Observer it's a Sunday newspaper, so it had all these supplements. So we had a lot of fun, and it was really strange to be doing chocolates in Barcelona and a newspaper in London. I believe that the newspaper had a lot of influence from the chocolates, and then the chocolates had a bit of influence from the newspaper too. But the reason why I'm going back, this is going back 20 years ago. The reason why I'm going back to that stage is because that idea of not specializing and going to, very different and complex territories became the DNA, and the idea that we were in Barcelona but we would work with other countries was also in our DNA. Now it's a very common thing, but we're talking 21 years ago now, and back then it was a kind of strange thing. People were looking at us like, you guys are crazy, commuting every week back and forth. This is actually our 15th anniversary party, which happened in the Mies van der Rohe pavilion. I know a few of you are architects, so sorry for the red lights. I know it looks like a Amsterdam whorehouse, but I have nothing to do. I went there like, this is a party, and suddenly these red lights had, somebody decided that we were going to theme it and make it the corporate color. Yeah, I reckon if Mies sees it from the sky, he won't be happy about it. But it was a good, fun party. But the reason why I'm putting this is because it's, like I said, it's been 21 years now. I'm from this small room. It feels really like things have gone very complex. Because nowadays there's 45 and counting people in between all the offices, 6 global partners, and 4 offices, and projects in more than 20 countries. That makes our lives challenging, our private lives very challenging, but it's been a really fun ride, because the mentality was always to keep it really boutique, keep it really small. Although we're 45, it still feels like you're running a small studio. And that means a lot of communication between the partners and a lot of understanding each other and a lot of trust between each other. The partners, we still design to this day. We are, a very active part of the design process. But there's no denying that things have gone, much more complex than when they were. So the idea still is that we specialize in non-specializing. So we don't think of projects in terms of scale. We see them in terms of design opportunities. So we will go from, an exhibition for Martin Margiela's exhibition in Paris to redesigning all the iconography for PayPal, or doing the brand for a famous cycling bike, to doing all the merchandise system for shops for FC Barcelona, to doing the ocean race, which is the kind of race around the world, the Formula One of sailing. You might have seen this because it's in Germany, but I don't know if it acts in Austria. Doc Morris, which is the biggest online pharma in Europe, to a brand fashion in South Africa, to doing an art museum in Australia, to doing still small chocolate shops in the city of Barcelona, to doing investment banks or corporate companies, etc., etc. So we still to this day try and enter territories that are very different. We try not to repeat ourselves. We try to learn from each case. And the reason why we do this is to try and construct a collective intelligence. So for this, we like to think that every new project is an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to share. So whatever we take on from a new project, we are somehow forced to explain and share with our partners, to making sure that what we're all generating becomes this thing that is much smarter than us individually. And this is quite amazing, when you've seen it happen in a room and then suddenly become this thing that you go into every morning, that you can feel that has a wealth of knowledge that you as an individual don't have. It's quite amazing. And it also represents opportunities to collaborate, which we take as much as we can. So the idea that we are different partners in different places doesn't mean we should be isolated, and we try and collaborate and get the knowledge of one another, specifically in projects. And once in a while we get also opportunities to collaborate with all of us. This is a small project I'm going to show you, which was quite interesting. It's for a company called Avery Dennison. They are paper makers, and they asked us to develop with them a collection of recyclable and autoadhesive papers that represent zero waste. And we saw this as an amazing opportunity to develop, to all the partners and associates in the company, develop, each of us take one paper and develop a piece of packaging and a label to represent the possibilities of these materials in cosmetics. So I'll show a little clip. So this was a project that involved, Luke was leading this project, Luke, which is an associate at Mucho, who's from the San Francisco office but now lives in Paris. Then the production was happening in Barcelona, so I was helping him out running the details in production and so forth. And it involved a lot of talking with printers and really getting to know the possibilities of each paper. And then every partner, an associate, designed a specific label to explain a concept and develop the concept for a bottle. So it's just this is an example that had every one of us involved, but the idea that I want to get through is this idea that together we can generate a level of knowledge that we can't individually. And this is one of the amazing powers of being part of a community. Also the very strong challenge is when you work in different countries, and we have, like I said, we've worked in more than 20 countries, and right now, in the Barcelona office, we might be working with 7, 8 different projects in different countries. Is this gone? Yeah, sorry, I thought I lost the audio. So the idea that we try and be local everywhere, and that's very complicated because of course we live in a global world and there's certain things that have gone globalized, but it is very important to get to know the local specificities and the design culture in each country. The way we try and do this is by having a team of designers that come from all over. So we have a very international team. Of course, we can't cover every part of the territory, but it also means listening to clients a lot, listening to their needs, and studying a lot. We're very happy to have now a very strong strategy team that takes a lot of time also trying to understand the local nuances. This is a very small project, but that somehow explains how in depth we try and go when trying to understand the design culture of a country. This is a small olive oil venture that these two clients decided to start. They started during COVID, or they started super committed. It comes from before, but they bought a land in Sicily, and this is the view they get every day, which is amazing. I was there actually a month ago for the first time, and this is a piece of land. As you can see, there's a river underneath it, and this is the state. Is the owner of most of the land, except for the stuff they have, because it is a connection between two rivers in Sicily. So the guarantee is that this place is never going to have anything built around it. So it's right in the middle of nowhere in the island of Sicily. And they have these amazing olive oil trees, which as you can see are quite small, but they're growing further and further. And then the complicated thing is that these guys are newcomers. There's two partners. One of them is from Sicily, originally from a family that had that land. That's the only way you could get that land, is because the family somehow kept it. They didn't have olive trees, but he became an expert in olive tree in Spain. And his partner is a communication expert. He has a communication agency in the city of Barcelona. During COVID, they moved for good, and they wanted to have something that felt Italian, that felt from Sicily, but this is the type of design these olive oils have. It's super traditional, it's super classic in a way. There's always some sort of illustration of a painting or a drawing or some sort. So it's very hard to come into this culture, and if in olive oils or wines, if you become too modern, you are somehow alienated from the culture. So you need to make sure that it feels Italian, that it feels from Sicily. So we had a lot of thinking. On the other hand, you're the newcomer, and it wouldn't make sense to try and reproduce this stuff that is kind of tradition based, because you just got there. So we thought about, okay, Italy. The amazing thing about Italy is how these layers of history go one on top of the other in a way that it feels like they don't care about it, but it somehow, the wealth in history and architecture is so great that, things will just come up as layers, no? And we thought this idea of layers of history you've got the Romans and the Gothic and the Romantic on top of it, one on top of the other, and the vernacular. No, you see all these typefaces and stuff being stuck on top of things, and we thought that there might be something with the idea of layers of history and kind of reinterpreting those layers of history. These are the two owners who are, good friends and great people. Like I said, they're two very different characters, but they have this common idea of let's try and do the most amazing olive oil. By the way, this olive oil has won literally every award in the industry of olive oils. I don't know exactly what it is, but every week they're calling me, we need to add a new medal in the website. So they're like winning everything. And it's super good. Like, to be honest, I get a treat of bottles and bottles of olive oil constantly, and it's fantastic. So then, thinking about this idea of layers, we thought, well, there might be a way, if we think this as music, and we think of this as, these samples that are made with all pieces of music to generate something new. So why don't we, try and get some of the elements of history and almost, as if we were DJs, we'll kind of mix them in a way that it becomes a contemporary piece, and it does no longer represent the history, but it kind of feels, it has that perfume of history. And that idea got us to kind of very excited about, okay, let's try and experiment with this. And I came to the first point was the logo. It's the two of them, and it's the idea that the two squares in different directions can generate, and the sum of colors can generate the sun. It's pure geometry, very simple geometry, but a kind of beautiful statement about what these guys are about. So it's the different colors. Also, one of the ideas that they're mixing Catalan olives with Italian local olives. So one of the greatest things, they took a breed of very typical from Catalonia type of olive oil, and they planted it in Sicily. So they're mixing these two ideas. So we thought, this could be a very simple, that gets started the conversation about the idea of layers. So that's the brand. And from then, I remembered that 3 years before this, I was in Sicily, and as probably many of you who are graphic designers were obsessed on typography. And there was this morning, I was in a village in Sicily where I saw this beautiful stencil typeface that was being erased and substituted by another one. And I got up really early in the morning and I took pictures of all the letters I could find, thinking one day I'll redraw this font. And suddenly it hit me, it's like, thank God I didn't erase the picture. So we went back and redraw this font. The beauty of this is it's a stencil, but it's kind of quite geometrical, but also very elegant and very sophisticated because it's very contrasted. It's very Italian somehow. And then the other thing we got is this font that the guys from Playtype did, which is based on the Italian plates. So this idea of, okay, let's bring different references, put them together, sample them in a way that they feel they've never been together, but somehow they work. But it needs to be obvious that they've never been together. So what we did is we took when you see these labels, the amazing thing is the texture they have, the level of the emboss that all these labels have. So we actually said, let's get rid of the ink and just keep the beautiful back part, the texture, the embossed. So we just had this kind of classic embossed that almost is asking to have something in the center or an illustration in the center, but let's forget about that. Let's just keep that and print shit on top of it. And so we thought, okay, the brand needs to go in the center, but then typography goes on top of so it goes against that kind of rounded center structure, and it kind of composes this kind of typography composed by a hand stencil, and we use, for smaller typeface, we use the kind of the plate typeface. So that's the result, and and it has a kind of classic feel to it, but it's quite contemporary, and it's just almost design pornography when you touch and see the kind of textures and how it kind of from the distance feels one thing, and when you see it close up, it becomes another thing. And we've generated quite a large collection for them already. They're doing more kinds and more different, and every new olive oil wins shitloads of awards. And so it's but it's a good example, or an extreme example, of how, on every project we really try, even if it's a global project, we really try and understand, where is it coming from, what are the roots on it, what is the local design culture. There's a lot of talk about the idea of problem solving, how designers we should be about, there's a problem, we should be solving it. I'm a firm believer that design should be problem solving, and we Mucho as a company are from that world of thinking that a client only comes if it has a problem, and your duty is to actually live that weight, carry it for a while, say, easy, I'll take care of this weight, and I probably don't have a solution straight away, but I'll think of it, and I'll come back, and we'll find an answer. But we're also true believers that there needs to be a level of visual poetry. So I wouldn't call it beauty, because visual poetry can be also ugly, but there has to be something that moves you emotionally. No? So this is something that I'm not going to show one project, because this is something that we feel or we think should be embedded in every project. And of course, everything we do is ideas based, because it needs to solve a problem, therefore it needs to communicate something. Back when there were CDs, I did a lot of music. And here's some examples. This was the last, after Paco de Lucia died, they asked us to do an album called Entre 20 Aguas. Entre Dos Aguas is the mythical song by Paco de Lucia, and this was being interpreted by everybody. And there's a beautiful talk about him talking about the water and how the water is molded. So we thought it might be beautiful to have his face made out of water, and this is actually something we did physically. But also small things like, a CD album that we did back when there were CDs, that is just, it kind of rises, and it's just a way of folding paper. And these are quite obvious examples of the idea of solving a problem, but also adding a level of poetry. But it can be taken to every territory, from the biggest to the smallest project. This is a campaign for the city of Barcelona for the day that everybody goes out on the bicycle, and the idea of less CO2 in the city. So we turn these riders into less CO2, and it was a kind of campaign all around town where we did this. This is a concert dedicated to Schubert, and we kind of got the glasses and an illustrator to do images behind it. Or even an exhibition, like I said, this isn't specifically beautiful, or it's not beauty, but it has poetry in it. The idea of punk being something that is quite rebellious, so the whole identity was around, let's just stick images of the exhibition and put, fuck about with them with this tape. Or these were the posters of a film about a club in Barcelona that started the movement of electronic music in the city of Barcelona. There was actually a club that kind of moved around. So what we did is we invented a little machine that was on a silk screen. We could move it, we could circle it around. So you would get, each poster would have a different, a different composition. From the literature classics of Spain, literature to turn into kind of visual contemporary graphic expression, to a hotel devoted to architecture and to an architect, and showing measurements as the idea for signage or dishes, etc. to another olive oil for a kind of small venture of two people, and the two colors. So to the 40th anniversary of the Joan Miró Museum in Barcelona, and using the shape of the building. If you've ever been to Barcelona, you recognize the shape of the building. To a hotel using collage and things that were never meant to be together, working together, and generating kind of this fun visual behavior. To often things that feel natural. When you see, this is a project that the office in San Francisco did. It's the Art Walk. So it's in a town near San Francisco where they for a weekend they kind of all the town is devoted to art, and there's these places and everybody goes from one place to the other, and it's kind of everybody goes walking around. So the idea that the word art had always had a walker, it kind of feels natural, and it somehow links to the second point that we look for every time as designers, which is the idea of the gift, finding a gift. And this is, sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it isn't, sometimes you really have to dig deep in it, but we're true believers that most projects have something inside the project that just needs to come out. In the same way that if it's the art walk, the word art can quite easily be turned into somebody walking. There's always hidden treasures. There's always things that are there that they feel like they've always been there, and just by you pointing it out and saying, "Hey, this is here," that's an idea for design. So this was the case of the UOC. The UOC is the biggest Spanish-speaking online university. So they are a digital native university, and they were saying, well, we are much more than what happens in the screen right now. This is literally taken from their brief, which at the beginning I thought, these guys have gone crazy, this cannot be done, and you'll see by the last point. Then we also said, we need to be dynamic, like our students, and the idea that we're present whenever our students are, they're taking classes while they're in a cafe, or they're taking classes, or they're, reading content after, putting the kids to sleep. But the complication here was that they were talking about strengthening the main brand, which is the UOC, but also giving a lot of character to each of the sub-brands of the university. So the university needed their own resources per sub-area. And we thought this, you either go for one thing or the other. It's very hard in one brand to build something that is, that strengthens the brand, but at the same time gives a lot of opportunities to the sub-brands. So this is what they had, which is a nightmare. But it's a common nightmare. When companies grow, they often grow and start thinking, we got to do this brand. It needs to be special from the other ones, etc., etc. So it was not only redesigning the UOC, but also putting some order into this chaos. But they still wanted the idea of but each one of these brands needs to have its own character. So that's a problem, because you can't have one thing or the other until it hit us, until we understood that there was an amazing present. And I remember that having talks to some of the directors, a university had just been redesigned, and they were playing with shields, as many universities, and so they were criticizing it and saying, this idea of the shield, we can't have a shield because we're an online university. What is this thing of a shield? And I thought, well, maybe what we need to be is the version 2.0 of a shield. That's what makes sense. Universities are shields, so hey, maybe there's a way of convincing these people if we explain them the idea of a digital shield. But that got us thinking on the idea of diagonals, how shields normally have, well, they might not, but we thought of this idea of the diagonal. And that got us thinking that if you look at the three letters, and this is where the gift is, if you look at the three letters, and if you go back look at their logo, the U, the O, and the C was quite geometrical anyhow in the origins of the brand. So thinking about this, we thought, hey, this is very obvious. If you cut an O and you cut a 0, you get a C. If you cut it from the top, you get a U. The only problem is that how do you cut them? And then came back the idea of, well, we're more than what happens in the screen. So if you think of a screen, a square structure, which could be the shield, and you compose the shield in diagonal, then suddenly it works. It's always been there. It's just a question of putting arrows to it because it was there. And to me, that exemplifies what we look for in a project. That idea of it's very complex until it becomes super easy. When we say embrace complexity, is this idea that, our job is to make things simple, but you need to understand it. You need to know the local knowledge. You need to dig deep into the shapes, the forms, and the content to try and come up with something that suddenly it can be done in any other way. So then came the second problem is, okay, we've got the main brand, but what do we do with the secondary brands? So this is how they were originally. Of course, we did a lot of work of getting rid of some brands and kind of unifying them. But the idea was, okay, let's change the shield. There's a standard shield, which is the main brand, and they will generate specific shields that will open for the behavior and the visual behavior of each section in the university. We also researched a way of doing photography, the idea always being that the action doesn't just happen on the things that are being taken photograph of, and that we use the diagonal as composition. So with that criteria, they could select and do as many pictures as they wanted. And then this is a little, oops, let me go back. This is a microsite that we did. And this is the first time we've done this, and we've done it a few times after, which when you launch a new brand, we're now, we launched this for social media, because there's a lot of criticism every time you change a brand and it feels close to somebody. There's a lot of criticism, so we thought let's just try and explain the whole process and the thinking. So whenever somebody starts criticizing, we'll just say thank you very much, here's the link, and they'll get the information. So you take the punch in style and don't have to answer, just give the answer, complete answer. So that worked really well, because bear in mind that this was coinciding with the change of the software and the intranet of the university. So there were a lot of problems, and the brand was likely to take the hit. But that kind of solved it, and it was quite good. For them, we designed a font, a sans serif and serif font specific to them. And our idea originally was do it open source, make sure that everybody can take this font and everybody can use it. They weren't as brave as to do that, but they use it all over the university now, and we're actually going to work with them again. And I think now they'll be prepared of making it open source so that everybody can use it. So this is the kind of general result of the whole change of brand. Oops, no video?
Benvinguts a la UOC.
This is the old one.
La nova UOC.
And the new one. We work with them also with audio branding to do from the anthem to the little sign and everything, to all the videos, all the motion graphics for it. So as you can see, it's a gridded system that allows for integrating content within the logo, extending the brand as kind of responsive. As you can see, the brand is responsive, so it can be extended. So that's that. Okay, that's another important aspect that has changed a lot in the last, I would say, maybe 8 years, where we're starting to get to projects before, not when they need to be designed or when we say here when they're being painted, but rather when they're being thought of. And this is, it changes the game. It makes it more complex. It makes it harder to establish timelines, but it's preferable. This idea that you become part of the decision table when a project is being thought of, rather than when it's being painted. No, when it's okay. This is the product. This is the project. This is the venture. Now you need to look for a logo, or need to do the identity or the graphics for it. But rather get asked, okay, we're going to do this thing, be part of the team. And this, I think we're in an era where visual thinking, the idea of the visual language is the most international one, is the one we can all interpret. And it's much needed because we all live at a pace that forces us to really think visual. So, as graphic designers have an amazing opportunity. It's easy to think that it was, a better life when we were doing posters and we were doing vinyls. But in fact, I think this is one of the most exciting times in history, because companies are understanding this idea that they need visual thinkers. They need people who are experts in the visual language. So this is one of the, we have quite a lot of cases when we're being introduced to a project when ideas haven't been defined. But this was one of the first ones, really. A bank bought a Gaudí building, the one in your left. Very dyslexic, so I have to. The one in your left. They bought this amazing building done by Gaudí, which is the first building that Gaudí ever built. But as you can see, it's not a typical Gaudí. It's more related to the type of architecture that was happening at the time. And this is a very specific Gaudí that didn't work on the trencadís, which is the typical kind of layers of broken stuff, and inspired on nature, but rather somebody that was more inspired on geometry and Asian influence, like a few of the architects of his time. So this is a Gaudí in the making. So the first time, imagine if you're the owner of this building and you're asking this young guy who nobody knows about to do his first building, and almost this building feels almost like a catalog of resources, things that he's trying, and he's trying different stuff in different parts of the building. If you're ever in Barcelona, it's really lovely to go see this. But the amazing part of this project is that this bank bought it, but they don't have a very strong plan of what they want to. They know they're buying Gaudí, so that's an amazing value, because it's Gaudí. It's to Barcelona what Mickey Mouse is to Disney. It's one of those safe values. So we got in a team with curators to try and define what the building would be. And of course, the first part was to have a logo. We had to have a logo before there was even a project, because they needed to go to finance people and kind of say, okay, we bought this building, we're going to do this, and that. So the first thing we did is, okay, this building isn't super iconic, first and foremost because it's in the neighborhood of Gracia, so the streets are very narrow, so you very rarely see this view, this general view. There isn't anything that is super iconic, apart from the idea of geometry and the tremblay, you know, the idea that you don't really, there's moments where you're seeing, when your eyes gets tricked by what's shape and what's painting, what's the structure. So we thought, let's play that. Let's instead of trying to reproduce a part of the building, let's play with the idea of the tremblay, the playing with your eyes and the shapes of these squares. So that's what we did. We designed this V that is the grid and the squares, but it's also the back part, and then has a structure, has a volume, but it could be a different volume to the one we're seeing, obviously. And it's this complicated structure that represents the V of Vicens. And from that, we kind of developed a whole visual language. We also did a secondary typeface that is almost the primary typeface, so it's not on the brand, but it's then on all the signage. And we helped them also design what was going to be an exhibition as part of the team. Of course, there were other people leading this too, but we were in the table thinking, okay, what do we do with this building? How do we develop? Of course, the architects who were doing the refurbishing of this building had a lot to say, but it became this thing of, okay, this is the first Gaudí, so it should be the guy that is more of a dreamer, that is, the most ambitious one, that is the one that has everything to conquer, everything to convince. So therefore the attitude, and also it's not in Paseo de Gracia, it's not in the center of town, it's in a corner somewhere, and it has to have a kind of alternative attitude. So we kind of insisted a lot on that, and that helped defining the exhibition project, which talks about, this being his first building, and talks in detail about the things he was trying, but also, we also work with him to build an exhibition on the first houses by all the architects. So there's a whole, it's no longer there, but it was for a while. One of the floors of the building was devoted to the first houses by prominent architects. So we also did the graphics for that and helped them with the exhibition. But it also was an amazing opportunity to not just work with, because we don't have the trencadís, which is that layers that Gaudí is famous for. It was almost liberating. We could do other things because, merchandising of Gaudí is kind of the obvious stuff. So we thought, hey, here's, how we talk about the kind of youngest and most fun Gaudí ever, So we played around a lot with this and this is all thanks to being part of the, being in a team of people that were thinking, what are we going to do with this space? Otherwise, it's just, okay, here's the thing, have a design about it, which is fine, but it's so much more interesting to enter things when they're being thought of. The other thing, I explained earlier that I worked for a newspaper for a while, and in the first week, I was given this advice, and this is an advice that's been with me for all these years, which is fight the battles you can win. If we, and this is, I tell this to my team all the time, like, okay, what of this we can't live with? What are the battles that we can afford to lose in order to win the big battle? And the bigger a project becomes, the more tactical you need to be about, okay, who comes in, there's a lot of people who have the power to say no, but don't have the authority to say yes to a project. So you have to embrace them coming in your boat, rowing in favor of you. And if they're not rowing in favor, you at least don't row against us, So that you got to be very smart and choose the battles and fight the battles you can win. This is not that big of a project, but it's a great example of really how choosing your battles from the beginning can also define the type of project that we do. And hopefully this makes it easier to deliver in the end. So this is Primavera Sound. I mean, I don't know how many of you know about this. This is like the biggest summer music festival, urban summer music festival in the city of Barcelona. And it happens right when at the beginning of the end of, just at the beginning of summer, yeah? Which is end of Primavera. So the idea is that they every year they want to do a different poster, and they're all over the place. Every year it's like a different poster, and they're always comparing themselves with the Sonar Festival. The Sonar Festival is the other kind of electronic music festival in the city of Barcelona, and Sonar is, which are good friends and clients of us, has always been very organized and very kind of consistent, and they keep changing it every year. And they take us, they take pride in this idea of no, every year is going to change completely. But that, from a brand perspective, poses a problem. This is their brand as they had it originally, which is Primavera Sound with a little tree, which you would never ever see, because when the new poster came in and the new identity came in for 2016, it would change completely. So this was the identity that happened whilst there wasn't a festival. In the website, here and there, they had this brand, but it wasn't generating any impact whatsoever. On the other hand, they kept growing, so they kept doing kind of new and different brands. A bit what was happening with the UOC, where they were like, okay, now we'll think of this, let's make every project different, let's do each project kind of interesting and so forth. So they were a little bit all over the place. So the problem is, okay, if you're having to organize more than 18 brands and it needs to be more simple, it needs to be more, it needs to work as a system that you build. But on the other hand, they take this as each campaign every year needs to be different. Again, one of those contradictions that are very hard to deal with. So what's the, we thought, what's the tool that we can meet these two? That, let's not fight the fight of things being, consistent, because it's not going to happen. They're not going to be consistent. They want to do, every year they want to do something different. So that's when we came to the idea of, this is something that happens on the festival, which is always these kind of vernacular physical brand that moves, that is made out of light. And we said, well, this is what they are about. They're about live music in the place. And we thought, well, that's the thing that is more your identity than anything else. Because every year you keep changing, but you've got this thing that is always there, that is very prominent. It's the image that everybody takes a selfie with. So it's more of a brand than your little tree, which nobody sees ever. So we work with them with the strategy part, and kind of, we came to this idea of, where music lives. They are about live music. And that's where it hit us. Okay, let's generate a collection of fonts that come from the vernacular, that come from the kind of these physical, made with metal, that are a bit clunky. They're not very sophisticated in their drawing, but they can have a lot of variety. So what we did is we built a font that is quite geometrical. It's not, like I said, not very sophisticated in the drawing. It's pure geometry, but it has different structures, different bodies. So it can have something around it, it can have something inside it, and it can mix all of these, and it can have a shadow, but the shadows, the inside, the outside, can be all together, can be separately, and this is like music in a way, So we actually, with this idea, designed, just by making modular, we designed, with the combination of fonts, we designed more than 50 typographies to them. So the idea being, use these fonts however the hell you want to use them. And every year, choose one, mix a few, whatever you do, it will mix and match in a consistent way with the identity. So that it's all part of one visual language that embraces change, embraces very different types of music. But that same tool also helps us to define the brand and to define all the brand architecture. So just by using one font to the other, or different fonts, we could establish sub-brands, product brands, service brands. They now have an agency, they have their radio, they have all sorts of. So just playing with color, we build a whole system in which, okay, in the corporate side of this company, you have these rules, and you're mixing typefaces in a way that makes sense. But in the world of in the world of things being applied, use the brand, use the movement, and build a brand around it. But then feel free using the fonts in the environment. So this is some of the examples. There's so many more. And every year I go back and there's things I hate, they do. But I think even the ones I hate, they're part of this, this family of things that they're doing with it. They're playing with it. The ones I show here, I'm fine with. But yeah, that's it. The typography became the attitude. We built on chaos to generate a brand. And one of the most amazing things here is they started giving these fonts to promoters. So if Ray-Ban was doing a space, they would give them the font and ask Ray-Ban to do something with their font. So they were actually generating merchandising for Primavera Sound so the brands are using, so suddenly instead of when you enter a big festival, it's kind of all these promoters and all these brands trying to, push their product, but suddenly it all feels part of one family. So these are some of the results. Oops, sorry. So this is all the kind of tickets and yeah. But you can see how Adidas did something and Ray-Ban did something and other brands keep kind of doing things on them. So the font is actually the solution to, embracing that chaos, but all kind of living in the same river. So, so this is another very important aspect of what we do. Creativity, I believe, and this is something I invented, I heard it somewhere, and I thought it was a brilliant description of what creativity is. Creativity is nothing else than seeing things from a slightly different perspective. There's this amazing phrase by David Bowie that says, there is no point in being more than 5 minutes ahead of your time. So if you are more than 5 minutes ahead of your time, nobody's going to understand you. If you're 4 minutes ahead of your time, you're not being challenging enough or modern enough or pushing enough. So it's being, when we think a lot about this and how, we all see things from if there's an issue, there's a problem, or there's a product. Because we are empathical, we have a tendency to see things from a certain perspective, and we all see it from the same perspective. So if creativity is that idea of, if I, when there's a problem and everybody seems to be seeing it from the same perspective and not finding a solution, suddenly just by seeing it from a slightly different perspective, things suddenly work in a different way. But the issue is that if you are, commerciality is the capability of people going from that point to that point. And this is typical, no? When you've, this was an amazing idea that came 3 years early, no? Or came 2 minutes too early. Well, if you are too far, then suddenly the perspective is not recognizable, and people don't regard this as the same thing, seeing from a different perspective. And I think as designers, we're attached somehow to commercial needs, no? Commerciality. So there needs to be always a point of creativity that is recognizable, and that's something. It's almost a very simple exercise. Some people are, by definition, in a different perspective than the world, and for them it's really easy to be creative. But I'm a firm believer that this is an exercise that can be, that you don't need to be born in a different place. You can exercise, seeing things from a different perspective. And this was the only thing we did really on this project that I'm going to show to you. Just see things from a slightly different perspective that we're always seeing. So this is by far the biggest project we've had to face. It was led by my partner Rob Duncan in San Francisco, and I kind of became the kind of creative free spirit. He was taking all the problems and I was kind of thinking freely. So he took the hard part of the project, but it was the redesign of Visa. And it was a very tricky brief. You have to think of this is a brand that appears in a corner of a shop all the time, and it appears next to that, which is no longer even a word, it's just two circles, very iconic. So there's a problem of scale. So Visa had played around with losing the lines, having the lines. You know, should we have it? If you look around town tomorrow, you'll see how some of the stickers have the lines, some don't have the lines. And you know, somebody researches and says, oh, no, the lines are super important for us because the colors, the blue and the yellow, are very important for Visa. So there goes back the lines. So the brief said we had to reposition the brand Visa to the idea of not being a credit card company, but an enabler of equitable access. So this idea that wherever you are in the world, your money has to go somewhere. Visa is the guy that makes sure that things are on the place at the right time and the way it should be. But you do not change the brand. So the whole process, okay, we need to talk about enabling change, don't change the logo because we're one of the 5 most known brands in the world. So there's no touching this logo. So you can do things with the brand behavior, the typography, secondary typeface, visual behavior, etc. Don't touch the brand. So that's exactly what we did. But we found a way to see this brand from a slightly different perspective. So the thinking here was, okay, the world is obsessed with a plus. Suddenly everything's something plus. Nike plus, Prada plus, everything's plus. And we thought, you know what, you're Visa. This is the type of thing we designers say. Oh, you can own this. You can own symbols that are universal. Well, you can't. You can if you are Visa. And we said, well, forget about the plus. Let them have the plus. You are the equal sign. If you really mean this, if you really mean that you are going to be, this is something that you're going to have to put a lot of money in communication, in advertising, and the transformation of you being the equal sign. You are not there to make it grow. You're there to making sure that one thing becomes the other thing. And the beauty of this is that it's always been there. You have always been 2 lines. So it's there. It's there for the taking. It's just seeing the same thing. It doesn't need a fucking designer. This is just maintaining the same proportions. It needs to see the brand from a slightly different perspective. It embraces the 2 colors that are represented and makes it more simple. But you have to build a relationship between symbol and icon that is fluid and digital native. This isn't a logo that you put one next to the other. It's a logo that it's a relationship between wordmark and symbol that have to work in a fluid way, in a native digital way. So that means a change of behavior from a brand perspective. Forget about the old, this is my logo next to my symbol. Forget it. This is going to be living together and kind of playing. So like I said, it comes from history. We at some point we're like, are we going to be able to register this shape? It turns out it was registered back in the 60s when they opened the company. So because originally the shapes were this shape. So this symbol kind of interacts in advertising. And it never stays next to the other. It kind of has a fluid relationship, as you'll see as it's applied. So there's moments in they've not been brave enough to have it just the icon yet. I hope that one day they'll be brave enough to just, when you see on shops, they're now keeping just the wordmark, but the symbol is this element that plays around in digital environments. So here's a little video. We did more than 10 of these videos with kind of courses to, I had presentations with 3,000 people on a Zoom call with no interaction whatsoever. So it's the most complicated thing I've had to face in my life, but I'm showing you today a bit of.
Recently, we've evolved our graphic language.
So here are some examples how we're using the symbol in different environments. We had Fieldio help us with this for graphics in buildings, etc. And whole new typography, corporate typeface, and a way of kind of composing with typeface, and also opportunities with the idea of the equal sign and the lines to generate signage, a whole new way of taking photography, as the video says, and also an iconography system that goes from very small icons to illustrated icons to big illustrations. all based on the ratio of the symbol and how that can generate some amazing compositions, and then applications of the brand in the typeface and the World Cup, which you might have seen at last World Cup. And yeah, loads and loads of manuals and audio manuals and so on and so forth. So finally, this is a very famous quote by Paul Rand, and I wanted to finish with this. Design is simple, that's why it's so complicated. The idea of embracing complexity does not mean that we need to end up in a very simple and understandable way and place. And that's precisely why we need to turn that complexity into simplicity, how we can turn problems into solutions, how we turn those solutions also need to turn them in style and visual poetry. And it all is very complicated until it becomes super simple. And it all comes from the idea of thinking, why do brands exist? Why do ventures exist? Why does a museum exist? Why does that olive oil exist? Why? Why would you do what you're doing? What gets you up in the morning? And that's where we need to translate that idea. And if they don't have it, we need to dig deep until they find the why do they exist. This is also connected to the collection of talks that we do in the city of Barcelona and San Francisco, where we do the why talks, where we ask designers why do they do what they do. And I'm going to finish with a little video that we did one day a few years ago, explaining why Mucho does what it does. And I'm sure a lot of you relate to this.
Many ideas and lots of images, lots of questions and many answers, much discussion, much thinking, several concepts and a lot of things said. Loads of feelings, loads of passion, loads of laughs, tons of coffee, a few early mornings, some late nights. Not just seeing, really looking. Plenty of sketching, millions of clicks, photos and videos, countless alphabets, all the colors, and quite a few shapes. No bullshit, no fakes, no lies, some mistakes, a lot of honesty, a lot of courage, a lot of teamwork, a lot of truth. A small world, a handful of partners, friends that mean much, and a lot to share. Growing challenges, constant creation, some breakthroughs, and a lot of growth. Much believing,
My moment.
much imagination, much design, and a little bit more.
Vielen Dank. So, questions. I normally, like I said, I normally bribe the audience for questions. I normally bring something and give away something to the first questions, but unfortunately I forgot a few olive oils that I wanted to bring. So yeah, go for it. Questions, if any.
Maybe a bit of light. Yeah, bitte.
So thank you so much for this talk today. I was really excited seeing you today, and I'm a huge fan of Mucho.
Oh, thank you.
And to me, it's like visiting a private concert right now. It's such a great feeling. And I have actually 3 questions.
Okay.
I hope it works as well.
As long as I can answer them fast, we'll be fine.
After the beginning of the talk, you said there that you don't want to grow as a company. Why that?
Tibor Kalman said that the easy thing is to grow. The hard thing is not to grow. I don't think growth for the sake of growth makes any sense. We've become 45 by not trying to grow. And we still think that in order for the work to be meaningful, for design to be meaningful, it needs to have a level of commitment to the work that you do, that if you become too big, it's very hard to maintain the standards. So we do often, because you're doing projects that are so big, you are obliged to give certain a level of service that obliges you to have a strong team. Also because you need the you need the talent, you need the brains, you need the people. This stuff, I'm only I'm here, but I have the feeling often that I'm on a big boat, that somehow I got the medal of being the founder of it, but it's become so much smarter than me. And this is not me trying to play humble. It is what it is. So that's the thinking. We grow whenever we feel it makes sense to grow in a direction or a place, or with the talent that obliges us to grow. But growing for growing is for businessmen, and we are not businessmen.
That's good. Thank you.
It's a very long answer. There are two more coming up. Sorry. Go for it.
It makes sense to me. The second one refers more to the process of your work. So you have been talking about finding those hidden treasures.
Mm-hmm.
I know what you're talking about when you're speaking about this feeling of finding this gift, but what or how long does it take you normally? Or is it, I can imagine it's always differently, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about this.
From 2 seconds in the first meeting to 5 weeks, I don't know. It's very hard to, I mean, if you look for them, they're there. The problem is often they're too obvious, or often they're too forced. So you need to find the right, and often you find the gift, and the gift does not align to what you need to be expressing. So there might be opportunities in something, but I guess your eye gets educated in formalizing and finding those gifts. Like I said, it's a different angle of perception. And once you're there, you have a tendency to find them.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
But there isn't a specific time. Sorry.
Yeah, I think Paul designed the logotype of Citibank
On a napkin in the meeting. Yeah, exactly.
within 1 minute.
And Michael Bierut said to her, hide it because we need to charge $2 million for this. Yeah. Very famous anecdote. Yeah.
And also the last question regarding the last case he showed us, the visa case.
Mm-hmm.
I was really impressed by this symbol you discovered there, which has been always there actually. And I was wondering, would you approach this project like this the same way if you would create the brand from scratch?
No, I'm sure. I mean, a project like that from scratch is a completely different story, because it would be a startup thinking, oh, we're going to conquer the world of credit cards back then. No? So it's a different story. And probably back then, the idea of equality, or it's an opportunity that was there, that was very obvious from the beginning. This is one of those situations where the idea came out on the first call that San Francisco and us had together. Said, there's this thing and it's there, and it would solve the problem of them. Do we have the lines? Do we not have the lines? Da, 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 da. Hey, let's get rid of the lines, use them as an icon, and it's an equal sign. It's always been there, and it was so obvious, but it took a lot of convincing. It's one of those ideas that we discarded it at the beginning, and we actually won an international pitch without making reference to that. And then they said, okay, you guys have won this, but now we have to rethink it. And that's when this kind of gained force. And in the process, there were 2 lines of thinking, and we were pushing for the equal sign, but it was something that they really needed to believe in. And then the advertising company saw it and thought, wow, this is an amazing opportunity. We have it. We have the symbol of all this stuff we've been talking about. So they became pivotal to convincing Visa that this was the route to go through. So it's in a project like this, it's very complicated. It takes a lot of convincing. It takes a kind of ways of back and forth. and there needs to be a history to kind of make something so simple work out. I don't think it would have been the same solution if this started from scratch.
Yeah, thank you. Why I referred to this was actually the idea when you create a logo or a brand from scratch, you do not have this approach to divide the sign from the...
You could.
It's not so usual. So that's why.
But the thing is, see, that relationship is completely changed now. I mean, digital brands, if you look at them, like native digital brands, probably have an icon that's the bottom and don't have the word mark because the word of the company is underneath it. So this is a relationship that we haven't invented it. Huh? It's there, and native digital brands are using this relationship more and more, where there's a role for the icon and there's a role for the word mark, and they don't necessarily need to be together. And if you need to, if you look at Airbnb, the worst application of Airbnb is actually when you have the A and Airbnb underneath it. It works so much better in a fluid relationship.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you. So some other questions. Anybody else? Okay, so full of impressions.
You took all the questions.
There's one in the back.
In the visa case, how long did that take you to convince people to actually be on board and to actually...
The project started the summer before COVID. I think I'm talking about. Then we got we got notified that we'd won this during COVID, and then it took maybe 6 months of talks, convincing, presentations, different layers of people who come in the boat and row in favor of you. Some of them don't refuse to row, which is fine. Some of them row against you. Sometimes I was talking to, using the analogy, I was talking to my partner Rob at some point, like thinking, hey man, now I look back and you and I are going to this cascade and we're rowing, and everybody seems to have jumped out. so it went through all sorts of phases. But it was a project of I'd say a year and a half. And then another year of maintenance, presentations, implementing, etc. So it's only starting, really. We're hoping that this will grow. We're no longer attached to the project. Huh? The brand has kind of been delivered, and the agencies are now working on this. And last Christmas, not this one, but the previous one, is when it started kind of campaigning around the world.
How did you get the job? The visa job? Was it competition?
It was a pitch. It was a paid pitch with, I think originally they selected 10 agencies in the world. They narrowed down to 3, and then we won on the kind of, the creative pitch. So the 10 previous were just portfolio and proposal. And then we kind of, I think there were 3 who pitched creatively. And we were lucky enough to win it. Always a paid pitch, though.
Okay, we start in the third row first, okay, and then let's see the next.
So you have all these offices around the world, and I wonder how you maintain a cohesive culture.
Yeah, that's a very good question and a long answer, but yeah, this is one of the things that I'm more devoted to, how the culture, how the studio culture is presented. Up until now, the partners, we were very much the people who were in contact with each other, but this isn't working at the level we'd want to, because when we were a company of 10 people, the partners could do it, but now that the company is slightly bigger and that we do slightly different things in one place than the other, the culture means a lot of communication between the parts, and so we've established new ventures in which we can all participate through the offices, apart from the daily work, to making sure that the design mentality is still there, and it comes from the kind of same DNA. I'm also writing a book on the design culture of the studio so that we can, all kind of keep this thing and kind of remind us the stuff that we say to each other all the time. But yeah, this is becoming more and more my task. So I'm starting to be slightly less related to projects and more related to maintaining the common culture of the company.
Are you happy with this?
I'm absolutely happy with it. Yeah, I don't see how any of the projects that I've done or will do are greater than this thing that I happen to have started. So yeah, I think building something that makes sense that could eventually live beyond its partners is worth a while. And of course, I'm a designer. I'm always going to want to design, but I can always get involved in projects when I feel it's, I need it or it's important that I'm there.
Somewhere over there?
No, please, I've had the questions already been answered. It was the question about the Visa project, but I also wanted to say that I just love your energy and how you made this presentation. It just felt like a psychedelic trip, but without the trauma part. And I just love, yeah.
Thank you. It's because I'm Spanish, so we're constantly in drugs. To you, it feels like we're on drugs. But thank you. Appreciate it.
We will continue to invite Spanish.
Exactly. Get more druggies over here. Exactly. That will feel like taking drugs.
But in fact, it has a rhythm. It has a
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
How many pitches do you make in a year, and how many do you win?
We try and avoid pitching.
Okay.
We try and avoid as much as we can pitching. We only pitch if it's a paid pitch, and we get asked a lot, but we try and avoid it as much as we can. I mean, I would say that a thing like Visa is a rare thing because it's Visa, because it's very well paid for the pitch, and because the selection is closed. So they say, okay, we're asking you and you for this. So it's a different thing when we are pitching for credentials. That we do a lot. No? So we send our credentials and our kind of initial ideas and thoughts. But when it's a creative pitch, unless it's paid and unless we're super interested in it, and even when it's paid and we're interested in it, we are very methodological. We have a very strict method in which we work. Pitches are based on doubt, whilst a project is normally based on certainty. So if you're certain that I have a solution for you, chances are that I'll have the solution. If you are doubtful and you're asking and you go, hey, you and you, come up with an answer. It's a very passive way of being, and you often design for winning the pitch, not to have the right answer. So we often, when we're pitching and we're pitching on a project that has money involved, we'll only do it if they agree to go through with our methodology as if this wasn't a pitch. And that's the only way we do it, and that's the reason why we only do it if we get paid for it. Because otherwise it's kind of losing a lot of energy in something that has small chances of happening. Another very long answer to a short question, sorry.
But following on that, now I have another question. How was your first answer for Visa at the pitch?
Sorry?
How was your first answer for Visa when you were doing the pitch?
What was the first answer?
Yeah,
The first answer had a lot of so we did what we were asked for. We didn't change the logo, but we introduced the new font and the way you structure typography and the way you had the icons. So the visual language was as it was. It had a bit of, it played around with cropping into the symbol as part of the visual language, but it didn't touch the symbol. But the idea of separating them, it was right there from the first meeting between us. when they said, okay, now we have to rethink this, we thought, no, we're not rethinking it. We're keeping it as is, and we're going to add this idea because that's the most powerful idea that we have.
Okay, one more question perhaps. Otherwise, we can also talk with a beer. But
exactly.
Yeah. So, first of all, of course, want to thank you for the great impression and sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you for being here.
No, it's amazing being here. Thank you.